There are a lot of key issues to be discussed at NATO, the identity crisis to declining European defense budgets. So what exactly would constitute a successful summit for NATO?
A successful summit for NATO very clearly is a summit where the differences within the NATO organization are not too openly to be seen from outsiders and are not too much distracting NATO's daily work, which is quite serious. There's the Afghan crisis going on. The so-called war on terror has new heights right now, and we do have a lot of problems of budgets and political constraints and differences there. So a happy summit might be that they somehow manage to cover it up.
Well, one of the key issues on the table is NATO's future. Will it morph from a military organization into a political one, as some have suggested?
Well, that certainly forms part of the system, and I think that will go through, but we have a lot of differences, for example, as concerned the relationship to Russia. We have had a closer relationship under the presidency of His Excellency Medvedev, but how deeply that has reached remains to be seen. There are the nuclear weapons, NATO's nuclear weapons, mainly the US nuclear weapons in Central Europe. That is a big problem, and I don't think we are going to solve that. There's the NATO defense, ballistic defense system that is also a big problem, especially also for German-Russian relations, and I'm not sure that this summit can solve these problems. So I have the problem with this summit that I do not think that the approach is correct. There are too many strategic differences and they are not really discussed.
Okay, well, talking about differences, it's reported that NATO's new strategic concept does not include the removal of Cold War-era nuclear weapons from Europe, even though Russia sees them as a threat. Now, will that omission hamper improving ties with Moscow?
Of course, that will remain an obstacle, though I do think that Moscow is clever enough to find ways around it and to show NATO some of the more clever ideas how to overcome the problem. But basically, we must see two things. Moscow's policy towards Europe is, in fact, in the conduct of foreign policy, a bit outdated. Moscow is reaching out to the governments, not enough to the people. And that means there is not enough public support within Europe, within Germany, for example, for better Russian ties, and that's what people like me hope for. And then there's another point, how to say that Russia is also not in a position right now to be strongly defended as a new partner within NATO by some of the NATO partners, and that's a general political flaw of the situation. And this to overcome will take years, I think.
All right, well, moving on to another point, the alliance's new doctrine won't single out any one country as a potential military adversary. So what exactly is the point of its existence? Who is NATO aimed at?
Yeah, the final document may not name Iran, but it was in the document before it was finalized, or is being finalized in Lisbon. And that means we do have to deal with the very serious threat of a war against Iran coming on within the next years. So in fact, NATO is looking for a more coherent strategy, more balance between, in area and out of area actions, and many countries, many partners of NATO and members of NATO are discussing, should we be as outgoing, so to say, as we were, and there's a lot of how to say, resistance doing more. I don't think any possible Iran war, for example, would be warmly welcomed by anyone but the US. And that is a situation, of course, where big question marks are also put not only behind NATO's future role, but also behind the next coming years, 1, 2, 3 years.
All right, thank you very much for your insight. That was Germany-based political observer Christoph Horstel.